You know, I always wonder where this picture of Rinoa on the beach in Final Fantasy VIII came from. Final Fantasy VIII began development in the middle of 1997, whilst its successful older brother Final Fantasy VII was being localized for non-Japanese audiences. Squaresoft, the developer of both games, would later showcase early footage of Final Fantasy VIII at E3 1998 in May. Whilst video footage of E3 1998 is limited, there is an article from 1998 written by Ken Gagne covering Squaresoft's segment of the event. This article discusses the games which Square had set to release in the US later in the year, including a plan to release Parasite Eve with a demo disc featuring a rolling demo of Final Fantasy VIII footage in September, and Brave Fencer Musashi in November, which would feature an actual playable demo of Final Fantasy VIII itself. Now, quite obviously I don't live in the US, so never got to play these games or any of these demos. But if you've been watching anything on this channel, then you'll know nothing gets in the way of me talking about Final Fantasy VIII, or demos for that matter. The first disc is titled the Squaresoft 1998 Collector's CD Volume 1 and features a playable demo of Xenogears, another game we didn't get in Europe, and video footage for Brave Fencer Musashi, Bushido Blade 2, and of course Final Fantasy VIII. The video shown here matches pretty much exactly with Ken Gagne's description of the footage shown earlier in the year at E3, and features mostly cutscenes with the occasional clip of game footage of the Dollet Mission from the beginning of the final game. The notable difference from the final game is the appearance of Rinoa on this mission, with all the characters wearing their normal clothing. The track playing over this footage is also an unreleased track called Visions of Dollet, which doesn't appear anywhere in the final product. So I'm not going to talk about Volume 2 of the Squaresoft Collector CD just yet, but it's worth remembering that clip of Rinoa on the beach in Dollet for later. Final Fantasy VIII released on February 11th, 1999 to Japanese audiences and sold around 2 million copies in its first week. It wouldn't release in the US until September, and PAL territories until October in the same year. This means that all the early gaming shows in 1999 had to feature a much bigger showcase for Final Fantasy VIII to hype it up for Western audiences. The first 1999 event featuring Final Fantasy VIII related content was a press conference in March 1999 in Tokyo, apparently advertised as an event celebrating the sale of 50 million PlayStations, but actually being where the PlayStation 2 was first revealed. This event, including shots of various tech demos like the Penguin Panic clip with Crash Bandicoot being followed by a bunch of penguins, a shot of Reiko Nagase walking along a catwalk, and the old man facial animation. According to issue 44 of the official UK PlayStation magazine, this event also showcased an in-game rendering of the Final Fantasy VIII ballroom scene with Squall and Rinoa on PS2 hardware, and it was manipulated in real time by the developers. Also, according to this article, Rinoa was swapped out for another character midway through to show just how powerful the hardware could be. Square also showed off the early PS2 hardware at E3 in May 1999, with a pyramid showing off a number of these tech demos and a playable demo of Gran Turismo 2. I can't find any first-hand source which shows the PS2 ballroom tech demo being shown off at E3 though, but it's possible considering that the majority of the other tech demos from the PS2 hardware event were also present here. Final Fantasy VIII had a much bigger presence at E3 1999 than the year prior, as there was a tower featuring an entrance with the Galbadian symbol and what looks like a full-size figure of the antagonist Edea inside. There was also a short movie which appears to have been called Enter the World of Heroes Squaresoft, which featured clips from Square's upcoming releases such as the PS1 version of Final Fantasy VI and Chocobo Racing. Interestingly, the Final Fantasy VIII clips include character explanations for Squall, Rinoa, Sypha and Edea, who incidentally are the 4 characters to appear on the front of each CD in the PAL version of the final game. It's also interesting to note that this video specifies that Rinoa is a member of the resistance group Forest Owl, as opposed to the Forest Owls, which is the name given in the English localization of the final game.
Rinoa, member of the resistance group Forest Owl.
At least one more of these translation quirks is noted when looking at the GameSpot preview of Final Fantasy VIII, also from 1999, as one of the hosts refers to who would be known as President Delling as President Daring.
The Galbadian President Daring, who has aligned himself with a powerful sorceress.
Now, the localization of Final Fantasy VIII wouldn't be released until late 1999, but at E3 at least a small section of the game was playable in English, as shown here by the Diabolus fight early in Disc 1, featuring English text. The PlayStation Power and Fuse coverage of E3 1999 also hints that they played the game in English too.
We may have given it 93% in its Japanese incarnation, but in English, the 8th part of the story is all making a lot of sense.
And goes on to say how much better the game is than Final Fantasy VII.
It's far better than Final Fantasy VII, and Squaresoft even confirmed Final Fantasy IX for the current PlayStation.
In fact, the Gear TV coverage says the same thing too.
Final Fantasy VIII surpasses the previous game in almost every way.
Black sheep of the series, eh? The B-roll from the E3 event features footage of Leviathan being summoned in-game, an example of the cinematic with the PS1 ballroom scene, and the cutscene transitions using the Dollet landing cutscene. All of these feature in varying degrees across different press features covering the event. There was also a booth showing off the PC version of the game, which features a battle with Sypha, Zell and Squall against a ruby dragon within the Laguna's 4th Dream location, which as far as I know, cannot happen in the game without use of a code or Game Shark. Final Fantasy VIII's video demonstrations released in PAL territories are very interesting. The first demo disc for Final Fantasy VIII came packaged with the Platinum version of Final Fantasy VII, which for non-European viewers is essentially its greatest hits release. This was released in June or July of 1999, as backed up by demo disc 47 of the UK official PlayStation magazine from July. This disc includes 2 short movies. The first is called Opening Scene, and actually shows a slightly different intro than the one in the final game. It's missing the spoken words popping up in the fields, but shows the Final Fantasy VIII title pop up instead. This also includes different sound effects, such as the helicopter noises and a ticking clock. There are also brief clips of the missiles heading towards Balam Garden and shots of the train from the Timber Mission. It also includes a shot of Rinoa on the beach that appeared on the E3 1998 trailer, meaning this is the first piece of video released in PAL territories featuring this clip. I decided to get a bit technical and checked out the metadata on this disc, which indicated that the files were created on the 7th of April 1999 after the game's release in Japan, but before the game showcased at E3. After doing a bit more digging, it looks like this video appeared on the Japanese news program showing what looks like the release day of the game in Japan, meaning it was probably made as part of the game's Japanese marketing campaign. Whilst I have no idea if either of these specific clips on the disc were shown at E3 1999, it looks like they are early production clips, which is backed up by the April 1999 date on the disc. The second is the PS1 dance scene with a sepia filter over it. It doesn't appear anywhere else I can find, but it's likely it was released as a one-off for PAL audiences, as the footage opens with the words Special Edition. The alternate intro movie, though, also appears on 2 other PAL demo CDs released throughout 1999, with much worse quality video. The first is disc 51 of the official PlayStation magazine, which was released in November 1999, just after the full game released in Europe. The metadata for the file on this disc says it was loaded onto the disc on the 31st of August 1999. This might suggest that the video on disc 51 was recorded from the Final Fantasy VII's Platinum bonus disc, which would explain its lower quality. This is of course speculation, but the text explanation of this preview from disc 51 says it's a brand new video, which in late August the Final Fantasy VII Platinum disc was. The lower quality could be explained by the file being compressed as a download from the internet in 1999, but the evidence I have that this video can be downloaded is only anecdotal, and Square's European website from the time can no longer be properly accessed. The video from disc 51 does seem to run a bit slower, and also has a slightly different ending animation, which does suggest 2 different sources. They are essentially the same video though. It is a little weird that this earlier opening video released on disc 51 of the official PlayStation magazine though, as a month earlier disc 50 featured the full opening cutscene from the final game without the footage of Rinoa on the beach. The alternate opening also appears on the PAL Peter demo volume 1, with the video's file date indicating the 3rd of November 1999, which was just after release of the game too. It's interesting that this trailer with the clip of Rinoa appears on the PAL disc, as this scene never appeared on the playable PAL game, as we will see as we delve into the actual playable demos. Special thanks to the PlayStation advocate community for all their help with this info. Now, as far as I know, there are 3 playable demos for Final Fantasy VIII. That's right, 3. We'll talk about the third one in a bit, but the first 2 are variations of the Dollet Mission from early on in the game. Before talking about either of the demos, I think it's a good idea to give a summary of what the mission is in the final game's release. Final Fantasy VIII starts off by framing the rivalry between lead character Squall and Seifer by showing Seifer injure Squall while training. After waking up in the infirmary as Squall, you accompany your instructor Quistis, who has the hots for you, through your preliminary exam to capture a Guardian Force in the Fire Cavern. Throughout this exam, Quistis gives you a bunch of infamously boring tutorials on how to use the game's junction system, which encourages you to equip Guardian Forces, which give you stat boosting abilities, draw magic from enemies, and equip this magic to the various stats these GFs allow you to have. After passing this test, you head to the Dollet Dukedom as your final exam before becoming a Seed. You are in Squad B, which is led by Seifer, and includes both Squall and Zell Dinched, who also doesn't get along with Seifer. After arriving in Dollet and securing the main square, Seifer gets bored and decides to follow the invading Galbadian army up to the communications tower. On the way, you have a mandatory fight with an anaconda monster, and then Seifer buggers off. Here, Selphie from another squad arrives and joins your party after she falls over. Just a note, I always thought it was a bit weird that Selphie in the cutscene runs over a hill, because when you see her in game after this cutscene, there's literally no hill behind her. Squall, Selphie and Zell all head into the communications tower to track down Seifer. Next you climb the tower and fight the Galbadian soldiers Biggs and Wedge at the top, and after a certain amount of turns these guys are literally blown away by this weird dragon monster thing called the Evolret. After you beat it, Seifer arrives and Selphie drops the bombshell that you've been ordered to withdraw and only have half an hour to get back to the transport. Of course, things are never that easy, as the Galbadians send a giant mechanical spider at you as well. Once you knock this boss's HP down to a certain amount, it falls over and Zell prompts you to get the hell out of here. Once you run back up the cliff though, it turns out that the spider has repaired itself and then follows you with some cool sounding pursuit music. There are methods to avoid fighting the spider again, but the usual strategy when fighting it is to attack a bunch of times, knocking its health down until it falls over so you can retreat. Once you reach this screen, the spider smashes out of a wall, and possibly the greatest cutscene in video game history plays. What you'll notice here though, is Selphie appears in the cutscene in this version of the mission. There are actually two ways to skip this cutscene entirely. The easiest way is to hide in the pub just before the last screen when the spider pursues you, and the second is to beat the spider completely, causing it to blow up. This can be done by allowing it to repair 5 times, and then killing it one final time within the same battle. With a well-junctioned party, this is definitely achievable within the timescale. It's worth noting that the spider can't fully be beaten in the first encounter you have with it. You have to let it pursue you at least once before it can be finally defeated. When you kill it, you are rewarded with a force armor item and a lot of ability points. It's also worth noting that after the spider is beaten, you still have to get down to the shore in the allotted time. So if you manage to beat it and then run out of time, it's game over. If you hide in the pub and let the spider get past you, then it appears broken on the beach and Quistis gives you a stern look. And if you beat the spider, it obviously doesn't appear on the beach, and Quistis just says let's go. It's cool that these alternative scenes exist, but none of these things are anywhere near as cool as seeing Quistis absolutely destroy the spider with a massive machine gun. Now I've established what the mission looks like in the final game, we can compare the two demos, starting with the US version from 1998. So firstly, the Final Fantasy VIII Trial Edition was released along with Brave Fencer Musashi, and is a very early build of the Dollet Mission. Now as far as I'm aware, this demo also appeared in the US Pizza Hut demo, and there's a version with the official US PlayStation magazine, but it was hard enough importing this disc, and as far as I know, they are all the same build of the demo. This collector's CD includes a menu though, which features a trippy version of the Final Fantasy Prelude, sounding like a cross between the Prelude from Final Fantasy X mixed with the sound font of Final Fantasy VII. This menu explains the controls of the game, and even has a menu explaining the analog controller, which was a new thing at the time. The second menu explains about the battle mechanics like drawing magic, summoning GFs, and mentions Squall's continuous sword, which is called Renzo Kuken in the final game. The demo itself opens with a wall of blue text framing the context for the Dollet Mission. A track that wasn't used in the final game plays, and the logo with Final Fantasy Trial version appears on the screen. As soon as you land on the beach, you'll notice immediately that the characters are all dressed in their normal outfits, and Rinoa is here. If you press start, the menu that appears giving you the option to turn the vibration on or off looks completely different, and there are no other students on the beach. The character dialogue is almost completely different, and makes Squall appear a little more open than in the final game. It also makes Seifer seem even more of a tool. My favourite line here is Zell saying, "Squall, check it out! That dog's licking Seifer." The swearing is written with symbols similar to how Sid swears in Final Fantasy VII, and Rinoa only responds to your questions with ellipses. In battle, the sound effects are different, and the rhythm for firing with Squall's gunblade feels a little off. You get access to some higher level magic spells like Blizzara, and can summon Leviathan, which is something you can't do at this point in the full game. You're locked into using Zell, Squall and Rinoa in battle, and don't get to play as Seifer. The limit breaks are also a bit primitive. Rinoa doesn't have one, Zell just has access to the Meteor Barret as opposed to the multiple dual attacks, and Squall's continuous sword is the same as Renzo Kuken in practice, but with a different interface. Also, the finishing move Squall can do here is Fated Circle, as opposed to the Rough Divide usable in the final game. Drawing magic is also different, as it seems like you're locked into only drawing a couple of spells at a time, and the cast option appears on top of the stock option, which is the reverse of what's in the final game. The biggest drawback here is the fact you can't access the menu to change your junctions or access items. This is a big problem, because it means you can only heal in battle. This combined with the fact that your characters are locked out of leveling up makes this demo much more difficult than the final game. In fact, I don't think the spider can be beaten. Considering the fact that you only get a 15-minute timer to get back from the tower to the beach, its attacks hit like a train, and you don't have access to the big damage hitters like Quetzalcoatl or Zell's dual limit break. You can't jump off the cliff outside the communications tower, and can't enter the pub either. This means there's no way I know of to skip the final cutscene. The Final Fantasy Union cover this version of the demo in their Cooper Chronicle Premium newsletter, which you should definitely check out if you're a Final Fantasy fan. The author Chris seems to think the spider is unbeatable in this version, and I agree with him. This article goes deeper into the minor differences between this demo and the final game, far better than I could with some good side-by-side comparisons, so it's worth checking out if you're interested in learning more specifics. The cutscene in this version features the gang in their normal outfits, and of course features the now infamous shot of Rinoa turning around on the beach. Whilst this is cool to see, the fact that some random soldier machine guns the spider to death is a lot less hard-hitting than watching Quistis do it. So now we've looked at that piece of history, let's look at the European version. This demo opens up very much like the full game, and even includes the entire black and white character intro, complete with the Final Fantasy VIII Overture. After this intro ends, you are given the option to start a new game or continue, which I don't think has a function in this demo as there are no save points. Once you start, the piece of music called The Loser starts playing. This is interesting, as it's the piece of music in Final Fantasy VIII which contains the iconic Final Fantasy prelude. This seems to be in some way emulating the opening of Final Fantasy VII, which also uses the prelude. This is followed by a quick message explaining how you can turn the vibration function off or on by pressing start, and then plays a scrolling summary of why the seeds are approaching Dollet, with the music track The Seed playing. After this, the Dollet attack cutscene plays, complete with the landing music, which is in the final game. This is like for like the cutscene that's in the final game, with Squall's face looking that much more detailed than in the trial version. It's pretty clear that this demo is almost exactly the same as the final game. Quistis even reminds you to equip your GF, which you can't actually do in this demo, and this time both Squall and Zell are in their uniforms, and there's no Rinoa. There are, however, a couple of minor differences from the full game. Here you can't pause out a battle, meaning that you can't actually change the vibration function the way the demo told you could, without going to the config menu and changing it, or waiting until you're in battle. The characters can't level up in this version either, and at the end of each battle you don't receive any EXP. Your junctions are set, and you have a whole bunch of spells that you normally can't access at this point in the game, such as Demi and Aura. You can also draw level 3 spells Thunderga, Firegga and Blizzardga from the Evolrets, and during the first battle Zell prompts you to use the draw command to acquire spells. Seifer also explains to you that you can scan an enemy's weakness with scan, and that the Anaconda monster is weak to ice magic. Selphie appears like in the full game, and you have long enough to beat the spider boss before reaching the shore. You can both jump off the cliff and enter the pub in this version, but probably the most interesting part is even if you hide in the pub or beat the spider, the cutscene still plays with the beach pursuit and Quistis gunning it down. The main difference between this version and the trial version, other than the obvious costume and dialogue swaps, is the fact that you can access the in-game menu. All of the options are here, with the majority of them being greyed out. It's worth noting that Zell has GF brothers equipped, but doesn't have the GF command in battle. This means you can't summon them. The GFs you have access to are Quetzalcoatl, Shiver, Ifrit, Leviathan, and Bahamut. You can only use Bahamut with Seifer though, and his junctions don't swap to Selphie when he leaves the party. You can steal all his magic though, which is worth doing as it's all pretty high level stuff. The limit breaks are how they are in the final game, with the only minor difference being that Zell has the option to use the Dolphin Blow, which doesn't appear in his limit break menu at this point in the final game. After beating the spider in this version, I got a random encounter with a soldier in the square I couldn't run from. It turns out this is the same in the full game, and it's probably a holdover from the scripted encounters when you first arrive in Dollet, because you can run from all the other random encounters down the mountain. Weirdly, instead of a Force Armlet, you win 10 Megalixirs and a Hypno Crown from the spider, which is nice, but completely useless as the demo ends more or less straight after this fight. This disc came bundled with a special issue of the official UK PlayStation magazine, released sometime in 1999, which I don't have and would probably trade my kidney for. The date on this disc is the 30th of July 1999, which is a couple of weeks after the date that appears on the actual game discs. This might suggest that it is the latest official build of the PS1 game. Whilst the fact you are locked out of leveling up, changing your junctions and skipping the final cutscene feel like design choices, the different item drops from the spider combined with the fact the magic you have doesn't appear to be junctioned hint that this demo may have been created from an earlier build of the game. It's unlikely that we'll ever really know for sure, but either way, this might be the most enjoyable version of the Dollet Mission with all the extra options it gives you. So like I said before, there is one more version of the Final Fantasy VIII demo, which is a PC version released in 2000. I have no way to play this, as I don't have a 1990s PC, so I got permission to use someone else's footage from YouTube. I don't know much about the full PC version of this game, apart from the fact that the music files are of a lower MIDI quality, which is the same in this demo. The demo isn't the Dollet Mission, but is a section of the game where Squall and Quistis head off to the training centre after the dance scene. This starts from when Squall changes into his dress uniform and ends after Quistis and Squall both leave the training centre after rescuing Alone. This looks pretty much like the full game. The footage I've used doesn't show off the menu, but the stock of magic you seem to be given here is junctioned as shown by the little symbol next to the magic in battle. The demo also features a summonable Leviathan, which is really interesting. Even though this demo came out in February 2000, there was still seemingly a drive to show off Leviathan as a selling point for the game. It's amazing that Leviathan features so heavily in Square's early marketing for this game, but it didn't feature in the final product until about halfway through the story. There are also save points in this version, and this seems to be the only Final Fantasy VIII preview which features Alone, which is funny considering how heavily she features in the final game. As far as I know, there are no more demos. It's worth mentioning for completeness though, that the opening cutscene also appears on disc 96 of the UK official PlayStation magazine as a throwback, and the PAL demo was also released in different languages for European countries and Australia. I know that the 1998 trial version also had a Japanese release, but as far as I can tell, the only difference between that version and the US one is that the game unsurprisingly plays in Japanese. I'm also definitely intrigued to find out the full story behind the playable English version of the PS1 game at E3 1999 too. Perhaps there's another early build of the game floating around somewhere, or maybe we'll never know. It was great to actually play the version of the demo which features Rinoa, and also nice to fully understand the context behind her appearance on the beach and a lot of other media. What I also like about these demos is how they start you off with magic, and for the most part drip feed the game system to you, which I think is a lot more effective than the long and drawn out tutorials Quistis gives you in the final game. Thanks for watching, and thank you to everyone else that helped make this video possible. See you later.